Hey everyone, if you're a regular listener of the show, I hope you'll consider joining my Patreon community. It's a great way to support the show and get extra exclusive episodes, including Digging for Justice, my DC movie rewatch podcast. Bonus episodes are available beginning at the $1 level, you can cancel anytime, and discounted annual memberships are available too. Visit patreon.com/Anthony Desiato. Thank you to all patrons. Welcome to a special bonus edition of Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to discuss the Justice League Power Rangers miniseries is one of the hosts of the Always Hold On to Arrow podcast and a first-time guest on this show, Lance Laster. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. I guess we have to give a shout out to Zach Moore from Always Hold On to Smallville. He was the one who, of course, we have to pay tribute. He was the one who linked us up. So thank you, Zach, for connecting us.
100%. Yeah.
So this miniseries that we're talking about here, Justice League Power Rangers from 2017, 6-issue miniseries, written by none other than Tom Taylor, who's gone on to totally
wild.
Yeah.
So wild.
He's gone on to have such a big career in comics, drawn beautifully by Stephen Byrne. And this was an intercompany crossover co-published by DC Comics and Boom Studios, which has had a tremendous run with these modern Power Rangers comics that they've been doing for the past few years.
Yeah.
Now, is this something, I assume the answer is yes, but maybe not. Is this something that you read as it was originally coming out?
Yeah, I did.
Gotcha. I did not, despite being a massive Superman DC Comics fan and a massive Power Rangers fan. It's funny because I've talked about this on the show before. I've always had somewhat of a, and I don't have any basis for this, but I've always had somewhat of a bias against comic book adaptations or continuations of movies or television shows. We have an episode coming up on Smallville season 11. I get into all of that. And in addition to that, yet another bias, I've never really been that into intercompany crossovers like this.
Okay.
Crossovers within companies. It would be impossible to be a comic book fan and not like crossovers within the same universe. But yeah. I don't know what it is. If I just felt like they were gimmicky or they didn't matter, they didn't count. I don't know. But I've never really had an interest in something like what we're going to discuss. But I'm so glad that my perspective has changed because I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, no, this is definitely off the beaten path. But I couldn't resist because this is two of my favorite things. So I had to check it out. And as weird as it is, of a subject matter and a crossover, it somehow kind of worked. And this is not the first time that DC's kind of dipped their toe into doing these cross-company crossovers, because they have 3 iterations of Batman and the Ninja Turtles, and that works just fine.
That's right. Now, I've big shock. I've not read those either, but maybe that will change after this. Now, we mentioned Tom Taylor. Have you been following his current work in particular? I mean, I hear nothing but amazing things about his Son of Kal-El and his Nightwing. Have you been reading either or both of those? I'm
reading Nightwing, and I love it.
All right, it's on the list. I'm going to get there. And Son of Kal-El in particular, we'll be covering it on the show next year. I've got massive Superboy coverage planned. It's going to be a whole thing. Cool. And I'm finally going to get there. It's on the list because I've heard great things. And I'm even more excited after reading this because I thought, reading this miniseries, you could feel the love for both properties, especially Power Rangers. I feel like, I don't know what his personal history is with the show, but reading it, if he's not a fan, he did great research because, it just reads like someone who knows and loves that world. That really came across in reading it.
Yeah, and that's kind of the strength of the Ranger comics that kind of started around 2016, is that everybody they brought on to write it have really strong ties to the show or really, really love the material. And this is something that Kyle Higgins has said. They basically write the show they thought they were watching as kids. And I love that phrase because it encapsulates so much and it describes exactly what they're doing in the book.
Here's, I think, a perfect example, and it's right in the opening pages when Zach teleports into the command center and he's just had a fight with his parents because he's always running off. He's disappearing and he can't explain to them, hey, I'm a Power Ranger. I'm saving the world. And it's causing tension in his home life. And he carries that over into the command center. And that's the thing on the show, as we know, there often wasn't real estate to really dig deep into the emotion and the personal lives. So even something like that, it was minor, but it was like, yeah, this probably would be a problem that these Rangers would have. So like, even that, like I loved it. Like, oh, that's such a perfect note.
Exactly. Because remember, like they even mentioned it in the book, like, like Flash and Green Lantern was like, man, I can't get over how young they are. Remember, they're like sophomores in high school. Like,
yeah, that moment stood out to me as well. And, is one of those things that I think is the value of doing a crossover like this, where you can have those types of observations and, it brings certain things to light that maybe, reading the Power Rangers comics or watching the show, you might not necessarily think about all the time, but then to have the Justice League's, comment on how young they really are, it's like, yeah, like it kind of, just kind of puts that in a different light.
Yep.
So why are we even doing this bonus episode? Why are we talking about Justice League Power Rangers? Aside from the fact that it's a lot of fun. So originally Labor Day week, which is when this episode is airing, was going to be a skip week. I was going to take the week off and have a little break. But folks, if you've been following along on social media, and if you haven't been following, I'll tell you now, I am launching a new monthly podcast series, a side project called Summoning the Zords, a Power Rangers fan journey. And it starts next week on September 12th. It is live now. It's listed on all the major podcast platforms. The trailer is up. So either right now, if you have your phone in front of you, or when you're done with this, when you get a chance, head on over to your podcast platform of choice, search for Summoning the Zords, a Power Rangers fan journey, subscribe, listen to the trailer, and get ready for the premiere next week on September 12th. You might be able to tell from the naming scheme, just like Digging for Kryptonite, we have Summoning the Zords, and it's the same approach that we've been employing here with respect to Superman, the same deep dives and thoughtful conversations that you've hopefully been enjoying. We're employing that same approach with Power Rangers, which alongside Superman is the other driving fandom of my childhood. And doing the Superman show, I've come to appreciate so much about Superman, and I've come to see the character and the mythology in this new light. I've gotten so much out of it. I've closed gaps in my fandom. It's been endlessly rewarding and fulfilling as a fan and as a podcaster. And so I thought, well, what else do I have enough love for and interest in that I could do something like this? And Power Rangers came to mind. And I know there are plenty of other Power Rangers podcasts out there, but this is kind of more of a personal thing. Like I really wanted to go back to those episodes that I watched and I loved as a kid and view them through adult eyes. And also, speaking of the comics, to read these new comics because they look and sound amazing. And the little bit that I've read, I was really impressed by. And, going back to what we were saying, I love this idea of sort of recontextualizing these, relatively simple, straightforward, kids show stories that we originally experienced, through this modern, more adult filter. So I'm so excited to get into this. And I already recorded the first episode with Ken Marion. We went through the Green with Evil arc from the television show, which introduced Tommy. So we started off with, one of the big highlights of the show.
Well, it's the iconic one. I mean, it's literally the arc that saved the entire franchise.
Yeah. I mean, you can't go wrong starting there. So that's why we're doing this. I wanted to sort of tee up the new show, but also pick something that would still be of interest to our regular Digging for Kryptonite audience, hence Justice League Power Rangers. And the last thing I'll say by means of hyping the new show is, if you have no interest in Power Rangers, or if for some reason you're like actively opposed to Power Rangers, I understand if the show is not for you, if the new one is not for you. I totally get that. No sweat. We have plenty of other things for you to listen to. But if you have any interest, or if you're a fan of it like we are, or if you're just kind of curious about it, I do encourage you to check it out. Because again, it's the same approach that we've been using here, but applied to Power Rangers. All right. So that's what we're doing and why we're doing it. And, we can kind of move forward into this. So I guess let me ask you the big picture question with Justice League Power Rangers. I mean, what are your overall impressions of it? And maybe more specifically, how, if at all, have they changed from when you read it initially a few years ago to, rereading it now?
Okay. Well, I guess first off the bat, like I thoroughly enjoyed it. Like this is a nice what if type of thing. This is something this is likely a one-off, right? So, and I was glad that they did a good job with this one-off what if type of scenario, because in no other scenario will you have the Justice League teaming up with the Power Rangers. It's just like two completely different worlds, like literally two different companies, two different fan bases, two different everything. So I just enjoyed the idea of it. It's wacky, it's fun, and they did a really good job of making it actually work logically for the properties that are involved in this book. I was very impressed by that.
Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, that's the thing. There was so much in this book that felt both surprising yet inevitable. And I think that's what I enjoyed so much. When Lord Zed is transported to the DC universe and he's instantly scooped up and shrunk by Brainiac and placed in one of the bottle cities, and he uses his magic bombs to grow and escape the bottle and stand toe to toe with Brainiac. And they forge this alliance because they both want the universe. One to rule, one wants to rule it, the other wants to, destroy and collect, right?
Yep.
So their interests are aligned enough where they can team up. And it's just like, oh, this makes perfect sense. Like there's this moment where, this element of surprise, but then it's like, oh yeah, like this, of course, it has to be these two teaming up. So I felt like there was a lot of stuff like that where, it kind of kept you on your toes as you were reading, but then it also felt like, of course, like it couldn't be anything else.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Especially like in the opening when you see what's going on, like, and you're just like, oh, well, yeah, that makes total sense. Like he would shrink Angel Grove. Like Brainiac would totally shrink that city if he had the opportunity to and add it to his collection because there's so much stuff that goes on there. Like it makes total sense. And then you wonder, it's like, well, I'm sure he figured out how to cross dimensions because he's Brainiac. So it makes sense. It's like, so every kind of question that you kind of had is answered through as the story progresses, and it doesn't leave you wanting in that regard.
Absolutely. And so while I'm asking you these big picture questions, let me also ask you about your Power Rangers fan journey. Now you'll be on Summoning the Zords down the line. There are a couple of huge arcs from the Boom Studios comics that you and I have talked about that I want to have you on for. And it'll be great to get your perspective when we get there as someone who's been following the comics all along. I can't wait. But for now, I mean, what is your Power Rangers fan journey? Like how, when did you get into it? And it's something that I know this from our conversation off mic, but for our audience, is this something that's kind of stayed with you all along? Did you leave, come back? What's your experience been?
Yeah, so it's kind of been with me as long as I've been, following it, and I've followed it from the beginning. I was there day one. It blew me away. Like as a little kid when it first debuted, I was like, this is, because when you're 6, 7 years old, like, and you see something like that for the first time, it's like this is unprecedented stuff. Right. It's like everything was just so cool. The characters were cool. Like you wanted to be them because like they're far enough away from you in age where it's cool to kind of want to aspire to kind of be that. Like it made high school look cool. And it's like, oh, well, when I get to high school, I could do all these things and I can know these types of people and all this other stuff. The costumes were cool. They were they were iconic. The Zords were amazing. The first time I saw, the Dragon Zord, like legit life changer for me. Like I thought that was the coolest thing I've ever seen. And so I just stuck with it. Right. I did martial arts as a kid, largely because of them. There was a true martial arts culture on the show, especially in the early on, because everybody was a legit martial artist. So that was an interesting thing to kind of observe as I did a rewatch when I was older. I was like, oh, they're actually like, using the culture of martial arts throughout the show a little bit more with the characters. Whatever little character work that they did on the show, they kind of put that to it. And then when they started to change stuff, so this is when they first went to Zeo. Yes. So this is what technically is season 4. Technically, if we want to go that route, I was like, well, this is odd. Why are they doing this? And then I realized as I got older, I was like, oh, well, they didn't have they when I figured out how they made the show, I was like, oh, they didn't have any more episodes to bring over. They couldn't do anything, so they had to go to the next thing. And I've always said this. I credit the writing team at Saban back in the day for coming up with some actual legit and logical reasons for why they had to change powers like every 40 episodes for a little bit after the Mighty Morphin era. Like basically like every 40 to 50 episodes they had to change, and the real world reason is like they didn't have enough, like the show was over, but like there was like, well, we got to keep this train moving, so they came up with a way to kind of keep it continuous. And I've always given them credit for that, because for a lot of them, like it's a pretty good chain, and it makes sense as it goes from one to one. So yeah, I've kept up with it ever since. There were some years where it was harder to do so just because I was growing up and doing other things, but I would catch reruns or I'd record it. Probably the silliest time that I had watching the show or keeping up with the show This was in college, and I was, already a member of a fraternity, but I was like really busy in this particular semester. So I made the pledges like get up early on Saturday morning and watch it, take notes for me. So if they're listening to this, sorry I put you through that, but it's a funny story for you guys to tell later. So I've just kept up with it, and the comics have helped with that regard. I've rewatched some stuff. I rewatch stuff all the time. It's just one of the fandoms that is stuck with me and seems like it won't leave me. So that's my journey with it.
I love that, man. And it's funny. I apologize because the first time that we talked about this, we just had a quick Zoom meeting, and I think I framed the question as like, "Oh, when did you stop watching?" Like I assumed that your experience was like mine, where it was part of your childhood, and then you kind of fell out of it. And it was really cool to hear that it's stuck with you all this time. I've got this, massive, decades long gap now in my Power Rangers fandom because I stopped during that Zeo season.
Okay.
So I love that you've kept up with it. And I don't know that I will necessarily go back and watch past the Zordon era, but at least within those Mighty Morphin seasons and the few seasons after that we're still telling the Zordon storyline.
Yeah.
I think I'll be playing around in that area for a while. But to your point, and for anyone who's not familiar with how Power Rangers was made, it was a blend of American footage and Japanese footage. So typically whenever they were when they've morphed, they're in their costumes, they're in the Zords, that's all footage from the Japanese show. And then whenever they're in their civilian identities at the juice bar, practicing martial arts, at the command center with Zordon and Alpha, that was American made footage. And so you had this really interesting blend. And I will say, I always found whenever they got new Zords or any kind of tweak, like not fully new costumes, but the ninja powers and those ninja outfits that they had, the intermediate step before they fully morphed in one of the later Mighty Morphin seasons. And then when they got to Zeo, those were always some of the most exciting episodes. So, to your point, it's like, it was born out of necessity. Like, okay, we're out of the footage that we were using. We have to do something else. But as a fan, it was always exciting.
Yeah. And as a business model, it was genius because they always, every season, every year had new toys to sell. Like, so that way, like, the kids would still keep buying them. And like the older ones would like kind of collect, but there was always be a new generation that would get stuff. So as a business model, it was brilliant.
Thank you for that segue. This is a podcaster right here. You look at that. All right. So audience, for those of you who are like, I don't want to hear about Power Rangers, I'm going to give you some DC toy talk for a couple of minutes here. So McFarlane Toys has put out this reissue of the Kenner Superpowers line of action figures. They're not identical. We can talk about that, but the packaging is very close, of course, to the definitely utilizes the original Superpowers design. The packaging definitely has that look that you'll find familiar, and the figures, it depends. Some are closer to the Superpowers, the original line, than others. But how many, if any, of these have you been able to track down, or are you trying to track down?
I haven't gotten to it yet, and I need to see them up close before I fully like make a decision, because it could be very, very dangerous if because I already, you understand this. I already collect enough stuff, and it's like I gotta be a little bit more selective about certain things. But I'm definitely gonna pick up a Batman and a Superman, because that's just that has to happen. And we'll see where I go after that. But yeah, it is fun to watching that, because I saw like on Twitter there, like I saw a wall of these things. I was like, oh man, I want to be there. I want to check all that stuff out. But it's, like I said, it could be very dangerous.
Yeah, I've definitely been very jealous, because I've seen people posting online these magnificent displays at their local Walmart, and these are Walmart exclusives. Yeah. Which is frustrating for me, because we don't, Targets are more dominant here where I am. And there are some Walmarts, but it's a little bit of a hike. And I struck a little bit too early, because I happened to be we were going to a party at a friend's house, child's birthday party, but we were close to a Walmart. And I was like, all right, like, let's go for this. I'd started to see those photos. So I was like, all right, they're out there in the wild, right? They weren't available yet on the website, but people have been posting photos. I was like, all right, we're here. Like, let me try. And, where our son was with us, and I knew I was setting myself up for disappointment. Like, in my gut, I knew it wasn't going to happen, but I just thought to myself, because he knows these characters now, and I just thought, like, this would be such a really cool moment for us to share, this moment of discovery of like, look at these figures. and to hand it to him. Because, I mean, I still have a memory of getting, it's a little nebulous whether it was actually the Kenner Superpowers or the subsequent Toy Biz one that used the same model. It was probably the Toy Biz one when I was little, but in any event, like I remember getting that action figure at the toy store, and then cut to when I'm 5 years old and the Death of Superman came out, and the Heroes World comic book store had the action figure in the little box to mimic a coffin, like that whole display that captured my imagination. I think because I knew the character and I knew the toy, it drove it home more. Anyway, I was really longing to have that type of moment with my son in the store, and we're walking around. Of course, it's not there. It was so frustrating. So I've not yet seen them in person. I continue to keep checking the Walmart website, and there was actually a brief moment where I was able to strike, and I was able to order 2 of the Superman figures and 1 Darkseid.
Okay.
I did get the Darkseid. Now, the Superman one, and look, the action figure connoisseurs, you can take me to task on this. I might not be totally accurate on this, but the body looks exceedingly similar to the original one. The head sculpt is a bit different. It's noticeably different, but still a really cool, solid Superman figure. The Darkseid is cool, but it is just a completely different design than the original. It's just his modern design, and it's neat, but I don't know. I don't know that I totally get the reasoning behind this. Like, if you're going to bring back that line in this form, I would think you would want it to be as close to the original as possible. I don't know.
You would think. I don't know. Sometimes the decisions made by these people that do these things are not the best.
This is true. But anyway, so I have those. I've not yet been able to get the Batman, the Batwing. I'll probably pass on the Batwing to be honest, but I would love to get a Batman and the Supermobile.
Oh, that's right. There is a Supermobile.
As ridiculous as it is, like it's the dumbest thing, but I gotta have it. Because I did. Did you have the original Superpowers ones?
I had a couple of them. Yeah.
Yeah. I never had a Supermobile, and I did an episode on this show not too long ago where we watched a selection of Superpowers episodes, because that had been a gap in my fandom. I had never really watched much. And so we watched the most Superman centric ones, and it was a lot of fun. And, we watched episodes dealing with the Supermobile, and it's utterly ridiculous why he would need this vehicle, but it would be cool to get. And then, I don't know if you've seen this, the latest development that there are figures from yet another wave that are now popping up in the wild. There's a Jon Stewart Green Lantern, there's a Flash,
I saw that.
And there's a Man Who Laughs Batman.
Yeah, that's so random.
So weird. Like, out of all the things.
Yeah, like not Robin, Wonder Woman, Cyborg, Hawkman, Captain Marvel, aka Shazam, like none of those, but like the Man Who Laughs Batman, really?
It's odd because it's not even, it's relatively recent, but it's not even like it's the hot thing in the comics right now.
Yeah.
It's just
like a couple years too late.
Yeah. So I don't know. But I like the idea behind this. I wish that they were available at other places and at comic shops and stuff like that. But it's cool that they're out there. I do hope to get a few more. And I got 2 of the Superman ones because one will be a gift for my son for his birthday. So he'll have his own. He can tear it open, go nuts, whatever he wants to do. It's fine. It's fine. Mine will stay in its packaging here in Flat Squirrel Studios, and I'll mount it on the wall and I'll look at it and it'll be great. But he can, whatever he needs to do with his figure, it's his.
Fair enough.
And fair to say with the Power Rangers toys that, do you still have your toys?
Not my original ones, no. I have some of the figure arts. I have the full line of those. Those are still in their boxes. And I haven't gotten into any of the Lightning Collection stuff yet. I only have a few of those. But I do want to get at least like the OG Rangers in that one. Because I think it's worth it to have. But I like the figure arts ones more, because I remember when those first came out, I was like, oh, these look really, really good. So I picked up all of those, like including like, the Jason with the dragon shield, Zach with the dragon shield. Like, I got those variants. So yeah, have that all covered.
I'm sure I've told this story on some podcast, probably more than once, but whatever, it's appropriate here as well. I remember, because I had a lot of the toys as a kid, and unfortunately I did not keep them. I think I brought them to my local comic shop and kind of put them in a box and sold them, or sold them at a garage sale.
Yeah.
But I remember there was one point where I was convinced that I was winning a sweepstakes. Like, there was some sweepstakes to win like all the Power Rangers toys. And I entered, and I don't know why. How was I? Eight at this? 7? I don't know, 6, 7, 8, like around that time. And I just remember, I think my mom was like, "Oh, like, do you want to go to the store and get a new Power Rangers toy?" And I was like, "No, like, I entered the sweepstakes." Of course, I didn't win. I don't know. It's so weird because it's like, why? I don't know why I would have been that confident. I've never been that confident in a contest before or since. I don't know what it was that I was just like, I felt like it was my moment. I was wrong. But yeah, the toys were such a big part of the show. But I will say, like I said before, I did record the Green with Evil episode of Summoning the Zord. So I have rewatched those 5 episodes, and man, they're great.
Yeah. They really are. They really are. It's those ones still hold up. Now, obviously, there's going to be episodes that you get to that are just like, this was kind of rough. Some of them will be like rough in a funny way, and others will be rough in a like type of way. But those, and like there's a handful of episodes every season that's like, that was really good television. I'm impressed.
Yeah, it was validating, I guess. Right? To go back to them. And it's not the first time. I've gone down some Netflix rabbit holes and YouTube rabbit holes over the past few years. And it's not the first time in decades that I've watched, but it is the first time that like I really sat down and I watched the entire arc from start to finish. And yeah, it was like, no, man, I really see why I liked this so much as a kid. And they're even watching it now. And yes, there's the nostalgia filter and all of that, but even factoring that in, like there's some really good stuff here. And like you said, the actors had the actual physical ability in terms of the martial arts that they were doing. So the fight scenes looked awesome. Like Japanese footage was great. It, I don't know, it taps into these core themes of good triumphing over evil and the heroes needing to work together, which that's the thing. I know not every Superman DC Comics fan is a Power Rangers fan. Like I get that. And if you're listening to this and you fall into that category, like right on, I understand, especially depending on your age. This hit for us at the perfect time in our childhood. And I get if you're a bit older, it wouldn't have that effect. Because to be honest, one thing that I've realized is even talking to people who are like 2 or 3 years older than me, for them, Transformers, He-Man, G.I. Joe, Turtles, that stuff was big.
That was their era. Yeah.
For me, a little bit with Turtles, but the rest of the stuff like I have no connection to. So I know that plays a big role, but I don't know where I was going with that.
Oh, good. Something about how this hit at the right time for us.
Yeah. It just hit at the right time. And this is where I was going. Thank you. I just got so caught up in remembering this wonderful show, but I know not every Superman fan is a Power Rangers fan, but I would venture there are probably a significant number of Power Rangers fans who are also comics fans, whether Superman or other characters. Because I feel like, again, in terms of those themes and the idea of teamwork and good versus evil, there's a very natural carryover there. Is that been your experience in talking to people?
In a lot of ways, yeah. And the people who've like wanted to talk about it more, they might have seen more of one than the other, but they get it, and they at least know the players involved, and so you can have a little bit of a conversation that way.
Right on. So let's dig in a little bit more to this miniseries. We don't need to do panel by panel breakdown or anything like that, but sort of the major beats, and to give people a sense of what this is about. So kind of our inciting incident in the first issue is Alpha 5 is missing, so the Rangers leave the command center to go look for him, and Zach thinks he finds Alpha badly damaged and brings him into the command center. Turns out it's a replica decoy with a bomb inside, and goes off and causes this huge explosion and allows Lord Zed and his putties entry into the command center.
Yep.
And Zach, in this desperate gamble to save the command center and Zordon and the rest of the Rangers, teleports Zed away, but the teleporter tubes are damaged, and so they end up landing in the DC universe. And I mentioned before what happens to Zed, where he's picked up by Brainiac, and Zach ends up in Gotham and butts heads with Batman.
Yep.
And the other Rangers, of course, follow suit to the DC universe to rescue Zach, and Batman has to call on the rest of the Justice League, and we have, par for the course when you have, heroes colliding.
Classic superhero fight.
Yeah, you got to have that initial misunderstanding and fight until they eventually have this understanding. I wanted to say, and this came up when we did the Green with Evil arc, but same thing here that really worked for me. It's not often that the command center is breached.
No, it's very rare.
And when it is, it really kind of sets you back. So like when Zed enters, I was like, oh, like this is serious.
It's a big deal because on the show, if memory serves, Zed never went in there in the show. Now in the comics, he's been in there a couple of times, and there's something that happened recently in the comics that is super interesting that I'm not going to spoil for you. But yeah, so that's not Zed's first time in there, but yeah, when the command center is breached, it's a big deal. That's how Power Rangers Turbo ended. Was the command center was taken over. Spoilers.
Gotcha. Yeah, I had stopped. I stopped during Zeo.
Okay.
So I never got that far, unfortunately. But it's also a key moment in the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie.
It is. Yeah, because Ooze gets in there. Yeah.
And not only does he get in there,
he trashes it.
He trashes it. And you're probably going to hear me say this a lot on the Summoning the Zords, because this really stuck with me from that viewing as a kid. But you see Zordon lying there in physical form.
Yeah.
It was nuts.
I know. It was completely wild. Completely wild.
Yeah. I still remember that feeling of watching it as a kid. Like, wait a minute.
Yeah, because for a legit second, you're like, are they going to kill Zordon in the Power Rangers movie? Like, what?
Yeah, it's crazy. Oh, I can't wait till we get to the Power Rangers movie. That was such I'm sure you have a similar experience. I mean, to be a fan at that point in time and to have a major motion picture, a theatrical movie come out. It was outside continuity, but whatever. I mean, it was so cool.
That was like one of the best like movie summers ever, because like shortly after that, or like around the same time, was Space Jam also. So it's like you have that and the Power Rangers movie. It's like, are you kidding?
Yeah. Oh man. So going back to the miniseries, as far as this initial meeting with the Justice League, the battle, and then the subsequent resolution and deciding to work together. I mean, what stands out to you from those scenes and from those initial interactions?
Just the I guess the one-upsmanship that happens when they meet each other, right? Because at first it's a one-on-one type of situation. It's Batman versus Zach, and then the rest of the Rangers show up, and then the Flash shows up, and then the rest of the Justice League shows up, and then like Superman's there, but then like they try to find Batman, who sent a missile at him from the Batmobile, and that's when they use the Zords. And it's like, so like it's cool how the Power Rangers don't escalate, because that's one of their rules until they need to. They don't bring out the Zords until like Superman essentially shows up, which I think is hilarious, because you need that if you're going to go up against Superman. But I thought that was like, all that was cool, like how they just kind of kept escalating until Wonder Woman shuts it down by putting the lasso around Kimberly, and she's like, "Yeah, we can trust them. We're cool."
Yeah, I loved all of that too. I did have the same thought about escalating, and you're right. It's like they call them the Zords when Jon Stewart creates a containment field around them, and it's like, all right, we have something that can break through. Yeah, they're always mindful of respecting Zordon's rules.
Yep.
And I liked, going back to the Superman of it all, I liked in that scene, Superman was one of the cooler heads.
Yes.
That prevailed. So I liked that. There are a couple, I'm going to jump around a little bit here, but a couple of Superman moments that I really like. So again, Superman podcast, we'll talk about.
He has a lot of great moments in this, actually.
He does. I think probably the two that stand out the most, one is when they all need to get back to the Power Rangers universe, and they decide to try to use the Large Hadron Collider to create this, breach in space and time.
Yeah.
So that they can, transcend universes. And I think Trini says to Batman, like, you can just ask to use this. And Batman goes, I can't, but he can.
That's right.
And that's Superman, baby. He walks in and it's like, of course, anything that this guy needs.
Yeah. And that's literally what they told him.
Yeah. So that was really cool. I also loved when they make it back to the Power Rangers universe, and Zed and Brainiac have beaten them there. And at this point, they have taken the Rangers' coins and Zords, and it's a low point for them. And Brainiac has bottled Angel Grove and
taken it.
Zach has seen his parents just go up in this bottle. I mean, it's a tough moment for him. And, he's just thinking about the fact that he had this fight with them. That's their last interaction. He led Zed, to this other universe. Like, he's feeling a lot of guilt. And, Superman is there to tell him, like, look, this is not your fault. We know who's responsible. Stand up. And I love that moment of inspiration that he was able to provide.
I do too. And then also like Zach's like, well, how could you say that? I just lost my entire world. And Superman's like, because I've lost mine too. And it's like, there you go.
I know. Were there other Superman moments that I did not love it as much when he's felled by the magic, but it made sense. Like I've always said on this podcast, like I'm not a huge fan of the magic themed stories or threats for Superman. It's just like not my thing. But again, here, like it really did. It made sense, and I liked it, and so I was cool with that. But what else, Superman wise, stood out to you?
When he tells Kimberly, he asks her politely to land the pterodactyl. I thought that was funny. It was very, very much a, General, would you care to step outside type of thing. But this is just a way smaller scale. He's just so polite. He's like, excuse me, can you please park your pterodactyl? It's a really funny Superman line to think about.
It is. There's just a sense of calm that radiates, from him throughout. And well, speaking of her and the pterodactyl, I mean, that's how the first issue ends. It's just this great moment where it's like, guys, this giant pink dinosaur robot has the Batmobile. It's cool because it's, that's the thing. There's so much about Power Rangers that I guess you could see as silly, but you could say that about any of the stuff that we read and watch. But, again, just to kind of see it through the eyes of the DC characters was a lot of fun.
For sure.
So let's see. I mean, just as far as the other, main beats of this. Oh, one thing I did like was, so after the Rangers and the Justice League, they're going to work together, right? The Rangers talk about how Zed is here. It wasn't just the Rangers who came through. There's this larger threat. Zed is out there. We have to stop him and bring him back. And of course, Zed and Brainiac have teamed up. And we know from watching Power Rangers that a staple of all the shows is, Rita, Zed, the other villains, creating or conjuring these monsters.
Yes. Right.
That then they make grow into these giants that the Rangers have to fight in their Zords. And so you get a version of that here, but Zed uses the creatures in Brainiac's bottle scene, which I thought was a cool connection point.
It was, because not only are the heroes working together, but the villains are too, at least up until this point, right? And so, because the Rangers are kind of perplexed at the creatures that they're fighting, because they're like, well, normally it's just like they're just not alive, they're just like things, right? Because Zed made monsters out of things that he saw or things that had personal connections to people. That was his thing. Rita, had people hand make those monsters out of clay, and then every other villain had like a gimmick, but this was very different than Zed used actual creatures this time that were taken from other worlds, so that was kind of a different thing for them to fight. And
I love too when they all race into battle across the globe to fight these monsters, and one of the Leaguers asks like, basically, how do we stop them? I think one of the Rangers is like, kind of just, I'm paraphrasing, but you just kind of like hit them until they
stop.
Stop, which is true.
It is.
But unfortunately, Brainiac and Zed, they get the upper hand, and Brainiac's drones are able to enter the Zords and
take them over.
Yeah, take them over, take the power coins, leaving the Rangers powerless and Zordless and looking for a way to get back to their world.
Not powerless. That was probably my favorite Batman moment in this was when they mentioned how the Rangers are useless and powerless, and Batman very incredulously and very sternly is like, they are not powerless. And I like how you see I think it's Jason and Trini or Jason and Kimberly in the background kind of oh, he's saying something nice to us for a change, because he hadn't been up until that point, and you understand why he's saying that, because he doesn't have any powers, and he's very useful, and so that's a nice way of Batman complimenting the Rangers, I thought.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That was a really cool moment. Yeah, Batman has some good moments here. I mean, at the very end when they're all hanging out at the juice bar and he tries to pay for everyone.
Yes,
his money's no good there, not for the reason you might think. But
that's correct.
He's got President Luthor. $100 bill, which is great.
Yeah, but that's also just so so crazy to think. This is the Power Rangers are having a smoothie in the juice bar with Clark Kent and Bruce Wayne.
Clark having a smoothie I can buy.
I can, yeah, but not Bruce Wayne.
Nah, I don't. Yeah, I agree, but nice moment nonetheless. So one of my patrons, shout out to Brian, had a question on. I'll throw it to you. He asked how well we thought the Power Rangers characters translated to comics. Now, obviously, there have been a lot of comics, and especially in these this Boom Studios era. But I guess specifically here in this story, like how well did you feel the TV versions of the characters translated to this comic?
Well enough, I would say. Not all of them are really all that fleshed out, because like Jason really doesn't say all that much. Neither does Trini. And neither does Tommy, except for the one time where he kind of had to stand up to Batman before they went into battle. But the Rangers that actually get the most to say and do are Billy, Zach, and Kimberly. Those are the ones that kind of get the focus. And Kimberly, my experience in reading the comics, since this Boom run started in 2016, has gotten a whole lot of development. So is Billy, and so is Jason. Pretty much everybody has, except for Zach. And Zach in the Boom run doesn't have a whole lot of stories that where he's like kind of the main focus for an arc or anything. Hasn't really happened yet. He's had cool moments, but he hasn't been the engine of a story, really, outside of the very first arc of Kyle Higgins' run, and this, he hasn't really been the focus. And each time that he has been, it's been something like this, where he's kind of going through something like emotionally, and which is something new for that character, because he's I don't want to say comic relief, but he's the lighthearted one, the funny one, the happy-go-lucky one. That was kind of his role. So it was always kind of interesting to see him in a role like this on the team. And so story-wise, that's kind of where people have gone with him. I'd like to see other things, but haven't really. It's interesting that he hasn't gotten as much new characterizations in the comics as I thought he was, because like some of the others have, like even Rocky, like even more most recently, like Rocky has. Of course, Adam has. Aisha's gotten a lot of good stuff. So everybody's had something, but not really Zach as much.
I mean, I'm happy to hear that about the other characters. That's disappointing about Zach. And Tom Taylor, he did not continue to write any of the other Boom stuff, right?
No. The Boom stuff has been the first 40 issues were Kyle Higgins. And then Ryan Parrott took over after that. And then Parrott's going to be done after 100.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's interesting. So, again, I've not read the comics, but just based on, going back to this question and in terms of this miniseries here, I guess I found they've translated well enough, because I didn't, in the show, their characters are drawn rather broadly. Like, I don't know that I would say there are such specific characteristics that I was looking to see here.
Well, it's because, and the thing is that what makes them stand out and what makes people remember them so well is because they're like the perfect archetypes for characters. And so as a result of that, you can kind of branch off and do certain things with them while they retain their core. And so that's what makes them interesting. And in the comics, they've all kept their cores, but they've gotten through a whole lot of development while still keeping their archetype intact. I think with Zach, what makes it hard for him to write is the fact that he was always kind of the well together one, which is why he was so happy-go-lucky about stuff, because he didn't really have there wasn't something that you can kind of pinpoint to as like, oh, he needs to work on this. That's never how he was really portrayed. And so I think that maybe is a reason why it's a challenge to kind of write for him, and why it has been a challenge for people to kind of give him something other than let's put him through the emotional ringer, because he's always kind of been just well adjusted to most things.
Right. Yeah, no, well said. Very interesting. A couple of other things that really stood out to me that I loved. I love how when the League and the Rangers, they're mounting their attack back in the Power Rangers universe, but the Rangers don't have their coins and Zords back yet.
Yeah.
And the League arms them.
Oh, I love this.
With all these pieces of armor and weaponry from the DC universe. You've got Tommy in the green war suit of Lex's. Like, I love it. Stuff like that was awesome.
Yeah, like Jason gets the sword of Azrael. Again, like perfect. Billy is using an Atlantean, trident, and he's wearing Prometheus's costume, like comic book Prometheus, not the one from Arrow. And of course, Zach has like the Adam's axe, and then and of course Kimberly has Green Arrow's bow and arrows, and there's a great bit in there with the boxing glove arrow. It's perfect.
That was one of the other things I was going to say that I love. I love that eventual payoff we get. Where do you want to describe the scene? Because it's such a cool moment.
Oh yeah, so like she's they're going through the weaponry, and Kimberly's and they're like, she has the bow and arrow, she has the boxing glove arrow, and I think she's talking to Flash, and Flash is like, yeah, it's a boxing glove arrow. I know, it's kind of silly. And Kimberly's like, no, makes perfect sense. It's when you want to punch somebody across the room. Like, it makes perfect sense. And I love the justification for such an iconically silly thing that has existed for nearly 80 years at this point, which is the green arrow and the boxing glove arrow. And then it pays off at the end, because that's how they take out Zed. Like, she jumps out of the Megazord and fires a boxing glove arrow at Zed and hits him square in the face and knocks him out.
I know.
So good.
It was so terrific. It was, yeah, I mean, it was so much fun. And, you know, of course they eventually reclaim the bottled Angel Grove, but they realize that the command center, Zordon, are not there. And we find out that Zed is wearing them around his neck, which I thought that was a great touch too.
Yeah, that was good.
So of course our heroes eventually prevail. You know, Billy and Cyborg, they team up. They have a lot to do together. Of course, the scientific minds, you know, that made perfect sense, and they're essentially able to infect Brainiac with the virus and disarm him.
Yeah, and they can recontrol the Zords. I thought it was a cool visual to have the Brainiac symbol on the Zords.
Yes,
that's kind of a scary image right there.
Yeah, that was really cool. I like that a lot as well. And yeah, of course, we eventually have the final battle with Zed. Alpha gets in on the action.
Giant Alpha throwing punches and stuff. Very, very cool.
Yeah, they never did that in the show, right?
Oh, no.
Yeah, that was cool. I was like, wow, this is, you know, something different.
Yep.
And I mean, we, you know, basically talked through the whole thing, so, you know, we'll go all the way. I mean, the series has been out for a few years, so hopefully people won't mind spoilers, but, you know, to your point, like this, what you said earlier, you know, it is self-contained, it's its own thing, but we do end on an ominous note of the Brainiac symbol flashing, you know, across Alpha's visor here.
With the iconic I, which is like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
What a way to end it.
Yeah, that was cool. That was a really nice touch. I wonder if there was ever any interest or attempt to do a follow-up.
Maybe.
You know, certainly the seeds were there for it.
Yeah,
it's a shame that nothing ever came to pass, because that would have been cool to see where that might have gone. But even without a follow up, it's still just a cool little cliffhanger to leave you with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it was. Again, I really look. Is this something that I would revisit every year? No, probably not. But it was a lot. I mean, it was a lot of fun. I really felt like it did justice to the characters. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, I definitely would read it at least one more time. What else about it haven't we talked about that you wanted to?
I think we hit all the big things. You know, Kimberly gave Zach a pep talk. That was pretty cool. That's kind of what she did throughout most of this. She's always been a good support character. The Power Rangers talking to the United Nations to get them to trust them, I thought was interesting in their Justice League, you know, disguises. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it was kind of odd because Wonder Woman goes in first, and this is when they're in the Power Rangers universe, and she sort of like paves the way for the Rangers to come in, and they're like, you know, we know you don't recognize us, but we're the Power Rangers. But Wonder Woman says, she's like, I've absorbed their shock, and now the floor is yours. It's like, all right, like this plan seems a little backwards, but that's fine. It was, a cool moment nonetheless, I guess.
Yeah.
It was cool to see, even though they weren't in their traditional Power Rangers garb, like, it was cool to see them interacting with others and with the world leaders in particular. So, I thought that scene worked.
Yeah.
That's pretty much all that I had. I want to, of course, I want to thank you for taking part in this. This was a lot of fun. Our first time podcasting together, not the last. Yeah. And I hope you had a good time as well.
Oh, absolutely. For sure.
And so I mentioned at the top, you're one of the hosts of Always Hold On to Arrow. So do you want to tell folks a little bit about, how you approach the show and what you cover on it?
Yeah. So Kev and I, we talk about basically as our slogan says, everything that makes Arrow. So not only do we talk about the show, obviously, but we talk about like the tie-in comics. We talk about the novels that have been written about it, the canon ones and the non-canon ones that we haven't gotten to yet. And we just kind of go through and talk about the show. We don't go episode by episode. We do talk about, in particular, like episodes that have like, that carry a lot of weight and significant episodes, we'll talk about those. But mostly it's, very concept based. We talk about we talk about the characters, their impacts. We do deep dives on that and concepts that the show is trying to talk about. And yeah, we do a lot of big picture, and we do a lot of like, a small picture type of deep dives into the things that made up the show.
Gotcha. No, it's very cool. I hope people will check it out. And I mean, as far as big picture doings in the Arrowverse, I know, I think probably your most recent episode as of this recording touched on the news of the Arrowverse's impending end.
Yeah. It's a end of an era. It's it's tough to see that, but all things come to an end at some point. It stinks that it's kind of going out with a whimper. It's not their fault. It's not the Arrowverse's fault. But I will say though that it was cool to see a live action DC universe like done well and done with some sort of love. Because like it's not the first time that DC has done a interconnected type of universe. They did it several times, with cartoons. And the first successful live action one was the Arrowverse, which people, the detractors of the Arrowverse really want to like, get at them for being on the CW, and it's maligned for, certain things. Some are fair, some are unfair, but they still pull it off. And there was a time there where it's like, actually, yeah, this is how you do it. So I'm proud that they were able to give us what they gave us, because, and especially on the CW, because that's like nobody would have seen that coming. And for a while, it was really good stuff.
No, I enjoyed hearing you say all of that, because I'll be honest. Whenever I've mentioned the Arrowverse on the show, I've probably been a little dismissive towards it, because of how it's petered out and how I've lost interest in all of the shows. I mean, I stopped watching Batwoman and Legends and Flash all like right after Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Yeah.
But you're right. And, listening to you say that, I can recall a time where I was thoroughly enjoying all of the shows. And I thought that what they were able to pull off with Crisis was tremendously impressive.
Yes.
On a television budget and schedule. I mean, what they pulled off really was something. And yeah, you're right. I mean, at its best, it really was something. And so it is, even though I'm not really invested in it now, I am sad, that we had a number of shows just canceled without a proper resolution.
Yeah.
And, Flash now is getting to the finish line, but again, maybe not with the fanfare and the strong finish and, that you would have hoped for something that really was a whole era of DC.
It really was. And it's not like people weren't watching. Like, there's a narrative out there that people weren't, but if you're on the internet, there's enough people that were, because everybody kind of knows what was going on. Everybody knows the people involved. Everybody has a take. People paid attention.
Yeah. Well, you're doing great work on Always Hold On to Arrow, and for anyone who's, who wants to check it out, I encourage you to on all major podcast platforms.
Yep.
So thank you, Lance. I look forward to the next time that you and I can podcast.
Absolutely, same.
Power Rangers or otherwise. Maybe there's some Superman stuff that we'll do down the line. We'll talk off mic.
Yeah.
Audience, thank you very much for checking out this bonus edition of Digging for Kryptonite. I hope you enjoyed our discussion on the Justice League Power Rangers miniseries. If you want more Power Rangers talk, again, Summoning the Zords, a Power Rangers fan journey, premieres next week on Monday, September 12th, available on all major podcast platforms. Digging for Kryptonite continues with all new episodes every Tuesday, so we'll see you back here next Tuesday. And until then, as always, it's about what you do. It's about action. Join the conversation by becoming part of the Flat Squirrel Podcast Network Facebook group. Like the Digging for Kryptonite Facebook page, and follow us on Instagram at Digging for Kryptonite Pod and on Twitter at Digging for KR Pod. Also, be sure to visit FlatSquirrelProductions.com for more film and podcast projects, including My Comic Shop History and My Comic Shop Country. Thank you.